I read it and didn't feel shocked. Didn't feel angry. I just laughed. In that cold, hollow kind of way. A few days later, Eric disappeared from all the family group chats. No birthday messages. No replies. No updates. Jessica told me, I heard he got into a huge fight with Mom. First time I ever saw him yell back. I didn't ask for details. I wasn't gleeful. I just thought, maybe now, he finally knows what it feels like to be lied to. The way Alyssa and I had quietly swallowed for years. The only difference? He was lied to with numbers. We were lied to with love. Eric hasn't reached out. No calls. No blame. No apologies. But I know he gets it now. That moment when you realize your whole life has been built on a promise that was never real. It doesn't need outside confirmation. It just hurts. My family used to be staged like a pristine theater set. Dinner with candles. Photos with perfect framing. Toasts with the perfect backdrop. But behind the curtain, the tiles were cracked. The wiring frayed. And when I walked away from it, they thought I'd regret it. But when I looked back, all I saw was a system held together by empty words, and now, there was nothing left to hold it. No money. No inheritance. No power. Only truth. And in that truth, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt free. Alyssa graduated on a cloudy day. The wind was cold, but not biting. I sat in the fourth row of the university quad, wrapped in a long trench coat, holding a cup of still warm coffee, my heart unsure whether it was calm or quietly churning beneath the surface. On the stage, hundreds of students were called one by one. The applause steady and rhythmic, like a shared heartbeat. But I was only waiting for one name. One voice. One moment. When they called Alyssa Monroe Collins, she stepped forward, back straight, gown fluttering slightly in the wind, hand gripping the diploma like she was lifting the past of both of us into the air. I watched her walk, not blinking. Not out of pride. Not out of emotion. But because I was afraid that if I blinked, I might miss the exact moment she truly became herself. Not someone's granddaughter, not the child turned away at her grandparents' gate, not the shadow of a broken marriage. But Alyssa. Independent. Free. Complete in her own way. After the ceremony, I didn't cry. Alyssa didn't either. We just hugged, not tightly, not for long, but genuinely. Then she smiled and said, "Let's go get sandwiches. I'm starving." As if she'd just walked through a major chapter of her life and the first thing she wanted was something crunchy, simple, and ordinary. She lives in Portland now. A small third-floor apartment, where morning light streams in at an angle, with two lazy cats who nap all day on the armchair and a charming bookshelf she built herself. On it are all kinds of books, from Sylvia Plath's poetry to beginner guides to pottery. There's just one photo of the two of us in a wooden frame, a candid shot from a walk we took one afternoon, hair messy, shirts wrinkled, unposed smiles, but eyes that were entirely real. Not the kind of photo you show off, but the kind that reminds you, we got through a very hard stretch, together. Her job isn't glamorous, a small interior design firm that works with private clients and a few independent cafes. She doesn't make a lot. But she doesn't need to. Because she has enough. Enough quiet when she closes the door at the end of the day. Enough warm light no one can snatch from her hand. A best friend who goes grocery shopping with her every weekend. And control over every decision in her life. She often says, "I'm living in a home I chose. Not one someone gave me." Every time she says that, I nod. I don't add anything. I learned that lesson too late to teach her, but thankfully, she learned it on her own. As for me, I'm still in Denver. Still working in an office that overlooks the highway, where people pass by faster than they stop. My life isn't new. But it's not old either. Every morning, I make coffee. Listen to the morning news. And every evening, I come home. Turn on the kitchen light. Cook for one. Not sad. Not empty. Just enough. Enough quiet to finally hear my own thoughts for the first time in years. Jessica and I text from time to time. Not long messages. Not deep ones. But real. She sends me pictures of her kids. I send her shots of meals I've tried from new recipes. Once, she wrote, "I think if I hadn't walked out that day, I'd never be able to forgive myself." I simply replied, "I know. Because if I hadn't walked out, I would have kept teaching Alyssa that silence is the way to survive." We don't talk about the other side anymore. We don't mention Mom. Or Dad. Or Eric. Not out of bitterness, but because it's no longer necessary. Some memories, when left untouched, no longer hurt. They simply become things that happened. I used to think that in order to break free from a toxic family, you had to do something big. Slam a door. Start a fiery argument. Send a 2-page letter with no reply. But no. Sometimes, all you need is to stand up, walk away, and not look back. They said I was the one who ruined the family. That because of me, nothing is the same. But I know, I didn't ruin anything. I simply walked out of a house that had already been falling apart for a long time. They built it with expectations, control, and silence. But nothing truly held it up. And I was just the first one to admit it. If you're still staying in a house like that, afraid that leaving will make you the one who broke it, let me tell you this. The breaking didn't happen when you left. It happened long before. You just finally opened your eyes to see it. I don't need a dramatic ending. I don't need anyone to confirm I was right. I don't need validation from people who only knew how to love me with conditions. I only need one thing. That I chose to walk away, at the right time. And for the first time in my life, I'm not sorry for it. And what about you? Have you ever been written out of your own family's story, not with harsh words, but with silence, indifference, or a door that closed softly, but firmly? Have you ever stayed quiet in the face of injustice, just to keep the peace? Or maybe there was a moment where you had to choose between belonging and self-respect. Share that moment in the comments. Because your story might help someone else realize. Love should never have to be earned through struggle. And family should never be a place where you shrink yourself to fit. If you see yourself in this story, or if you're trying to walk away from a house that only exists in name, click subscribe and turn on the bell for Family Ashes. We're not here to tell sensational stories. We're here to remind you. Silence is not love. And sometimes, walking away is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. I stared at the message for a while, then set my phone down on the table next to my last coffee of the day. Outside, the wind was picking up, the tree branches on the porch shaking like rain was coming. But inside me, things felt clear. Like something heavy had finally left my body. I imagined Eric in that moment, reviewing the contract, calling the accountant, realizing he was the only one left holding the bill, nearly $14,000. Because he thought he had control. Because he assumed his 2 little sisters would never dare say no. But he was wrong. And not just about the money. He was wrong in thinking family could be managed through pressure. He was wrong in thinking we were still the little girls too afraid to walk away. Now, no one was left to cover for anyone else. For the first time, my parents lost their grip. Not through tears. Not through their status as elders. Not through financial control. For the first time, they had to bear the cost of what they created. And me? I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt balance. As if, finally, the table that had been tilted for 30 years had started to level. No one had to flip it. No one had to scream. We just pulled our hands away at the right moment and let it collapse under its own weight. They showed up at around 10 in the morning. No warning. No message ahead. I was peeling apples in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell ring, long, firm, the kind of ring people use only when they still believe they're entitled to knock at any time they please. Tyler had gone out to get milk for the kids. Alyssa was still upstairs, sleeping late after a night of tossing and turning. I walked into the living room and glanced through the window beside the front door. The figures were familiar. My mother in her beige blazer, the one she reserved for moments when she needed to maintain dignity. My father stood beside her, holding a navy blue file folder, the kind he used back in his banking days. The two of them looked like they were preparing for a business meeting, not an apology, not a family visit. I opened the door. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just enough. My mother smiled, tilted her head slightly, and said in a deliberately gentle tone, "We thought we should talk. About yesterday." I nodded. "Alyssa's still asleep." "So, could you call her down?" my father interjected. He didn't look at me. His eyes focused somewhere past my shoulder, as if the kitchen behind me was more important than the conversation happening right in front of him. I hesitated for a beat, then called upstairs. "Alyssa, your grandparents are here." There was a pause from above. The kind of silence that didn't come from not hearing, but from consideration. Then, after 10 or so seconds, I heard the soft steps of feet coming down the stairs. Alyssa was wearing a loose gray sweater. Her hair was tied up quickly, her eyes showing faint dark circles from a restless night. But when she reached the last step, I saw something else. Not fatigue. Not sadness. Clarity. She stopped, stood straight, arms relaxed at her sides, no hugging herself, no scratching her head, no avoiding eye contact. She looked directly into my mother's eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. My mother was the first to speak. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Alyssa. It's just, there was a lot happening that day, and we wanted to keep things simple." Alyssa didn't respond right away. She tilted her head slightly, then replied, her voice calm, like reciting a truth that had already been written down. "I'm not angry." I saw my mother exhale gently. A small smile flickered across her lips, but it vanished the moment Alyssa continued. "I'm just done." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't emphasize the words. She didn't need to. But I watched my mother freeze, like someone had grabbed her wrist mid-motion. My father tightened his grip on the folder in his hands, as if whatever was inside had suddenly become heavier. My mother opened her mouth again. "Alyssa, we didn't mean it that way. We just thought." "I understand," Alyssa interrupted, still respectful. "You don't need to explain. Really. I appreciate what you've done. But, some doors, once closed, are better left that way." My mother tried to speak again, but this time I stepped forward, stood beside Alyssa, saying nothing. I didn't need to. I just wanted her to know I was on her side. They stood in silence for a moment longer. Then my mother turned to my father and gave a small nod. "We should go. Thank you for giving us the chance to talk," she added as they stepped toward the door. But her voice no longer held that calm, polished tone. It sounded tired. Breathless. Like someone who just realized they weren't steering anymore. The door clicked shut behind them, softly, but to me, it rang like confirmation. I turned to look at Alyssa. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just stood there, head slightly bowed, as if checking in with herself to see if anything inside had been shaken. Then she turned toward the kitchen, sat at the table, and poured herself a glass of water. I stayed where I was, still holding the paring knife I'd used to peel fruit that morning. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a child who needed protection. I saw a woman who knew her worth. A woman who knew exactly when to step back. I used to be terrified that my daughter would have to face the same things I had. But now I know, she isn't repeating my story. She's rewriting the ending. And I was so proud. I couldn't even speak. I just quietly finished peeling the apple, so she would know, no matter what, there are still people who will stay. From start to finish. The weeks that followed didn't pass quickly, but they weren't slow enough to give me time to dwell on things either. Everything unfolded like a pre-mixed chemical reaction. All it took was a spark, and the rest started burning on its own. My parents' second wedding, or rather, the 40th anniversary celebration they kept calling sacred, became the topic of every family conversation. I wasn't there, but I knew what was being said. Because people texted me, called me. Some even emailed, filled with subtle hints, things like, "Hope you find peace in your heart and the strength to forgive." Forgive who? For what? No one dared to say it outright. But everyone understood, I was the one who ruined it. The one who pulled her daughter out of a joyful family day. The difficult middle child. The bitter one. The one who never knew her place. Eric, of course, was the first to speak publicly. He went around telling every relative that he was stuck with the entire damn bill because two crazy women decided to burn the whole family down over their pride. Apparently, he said that over dinner with Aunt Marlene, who later repeated it to Jessica, whispering, "Your mom is heartbroken. She looks like she aged 10 years. I didn't respond. Didn't correct anything. Didn't post a status. Didn't ask anyone to share my side. Not because I had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't need to be understood to know I was right. What I didn't expect, though, was that the truth would begin to surface, all on its own. It started with a surprise phone call between Jessica and our dad's former financial advisor. She'd called to confirm a few inheritance documents our mom had once mentioned. "Something doesn't add up," Jessica said when she called me right after. I asked, "What do you mean?" She paused. Then said, "Remember how they said the house was paid off 5 years ago? It's still mortgaged. And not by a small amount." I didn't reply. Because I knew, if there was one thing my parents were best at, it was making everything look under control. But now, the truth was crumbling piece by piece. The savings account they once boasted was secure for retirement? Empty. The house Eric was sure he'd inherit? Tied up in a loan with a floating interest rate. The investments they used to speak of so proudly? Just a few short-term contracts with no real long-term value. Jessica sent me a screenshot of an email from the bank titled, "Outstanding Liabilities, Collins Household." Alyssa was sitting alone in a corner of a small cafe, just under 2 blocks from the event venue. I had to ask the staff 3 times before the young woman behind the pastry counter raised her hand and pointed to the window, where a girl with a low ponytail, wearing a deep blue dress, sat with her back to the room. I didn't need to look closely to know it was her. She sat motionless, both hands wrapped around a cup of iced tea, now watered down, the liquid inside faded like emotions diluted after a rejection. Beside the glass was a worn-out canvas tote bag, something she always carried like a habit formed by students living away from home, probably holding her laptop, books, some craft materials, and a gift box I knew for certain was the photo frame she had made by hand over a month ago. The same gift she had once smiled softly about when she said, "I hope they still like their old wedding photo." I slowed down as I approached, not wanting to startle her. But as I got closer, Alyssa looked up. Her eyes didn't show anger. Didn't hold resentment. Just something older than her age. Like someone who had something inside them break, but still had enough dignity not to show it. I sat down across from her. Said nothing. I didn't have to. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence shared by people who had long gotten used to not receiving explanations. A few minutes later, I pulled out my phone. Called Jessica. My sister picked up on the second ring. In the background, I could hear the chaotic sounds of chatter, clinking glasses, and soft music. She was clearly still at the anniversary celebration. I caught my mother's voice faintly, laughing with someone else, gentle, composed, as if this afternoon were unfolding perfectly. "Jess," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want you to know." Alyssa showed up. They turned her away at the gate. There was silence on the other end. I could hear Jessica breathing, then a louder exhale. Not out of shock, but like someone hit with a blow they'd grown used to, except this time, they weren't going to swallow it anymore. "What did they say?" she asked. I looked at Alyssa. She was gently pressing her finger along the rim of her glass, but she didn't look at me. "They said she's not family," I answered. "Not official. Not blood." Jessica paused again. I thought she might say it was all a misunderstanding, or try to soften it somehow. But she didn't. Her voice dropped, calm, steady, unwavering. "I'm leaving. I'm not going to let that girl believe she's wrong for being born." I swallowed hard. Not out of surprise, but because I never thought I'd hear that sentence come from someone who grew up in the same system I did, someone who once got a share of the affection I never had. "Thank you," I said, though I knew the words weren't enough. But she didn't need more. About 15 minutes later, a soft bell rang near the front of the cafe. I turned and saw Jessica walking in, her coat draped over one arm, hair slightly tousled, cheeks flushed from walking fast. Behind her was her husband, head slightly down, saying nothing. And two kids, one 5, one 8, trailed behind, still wearing balloon bracelets on their wrists. Alyssa looked up, eyes widening slightly. But she didn't speak. I looked at her, then at Jessica, then turned away, because my throat was tightening again. Jessica pulled out a chair and sat beside me. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't have to. She placed her hand gently on mine. A brief touch, not dramatic, not symbolic, but I understood what it said: "You're not alone anymore." We sat like that, 3 adults, 3 children, in a small roadside cafe. Each of us carrying a different kind of wound, but for the first time, no one was trying to hide it. No one needed to cry. No one needed to say, "I understand." Jessica's presence was enough. She didn't take my side because we were sisters. She took my side because of my daughter. Because no child should have to learn silence as a response to rejection. I looked at her. She looked at me. No smile. No comforting words. Just an expression, calm, tired, but unwavering. And I realized, some moments don't need to be explosive. They just need one person to stand up. One person to walk out. One person to say, "Enough." And this time, I wasn't the only one. We didn't leave that celebration by burning it down. We left by stepping out. Stepping out with the quiet resolve of people who finally understand, real love should never require permission. I was standing in the kitchen, right hand stirring pancake batter, left hand holding the phone that had rung 6 times in a row. The name on the screen wasn't a surprise: Eric Collins. My brother. The designated heir. The one who always believed he was doing the big things while we were just getting in the way. The call came early, before I even had a chance to make coffee. Alyssa was still curled up on the sofa, one leg sticking out from under a thin blanket. I figured she was exhausted, tired from being rejected, tired from holding in tears in front of her grandparents, tired from having to grow up too soon in a family where affection always came with conditions. I let the phone ring and ring. Not because I was avoiding him. But because I already knew this wasn't a check-in. This was about money. Eventually, I picked up. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped the moment I answered, no breath, no hello, no restraint. "You think you can walk out in the middle of the event, cause a scene, and then just wipe your hands clean of the bill?" $14,000, Rebecca. 14,000. I said nothing. I let him continue, because I knew, ever since we were kids, Eric had never needed a pause to speak. "You're destroying this family. Everything. For what? A damn misunderstanding? You're always overly sensitive, Rebecca. You always think everything is a personal attack. Do you even know what you're doing? You're embarrassing the entire family." At that moment, I was still pouring pancake batter onto a hot pan. The quiet sizzle filled the kitchen. The smell of melted butter spread into the air. I watched the edges of the pancake start to firm, then flipped it with one hand. Each movement calm and steady, like I was making breakfast on a normal morning. But it wasn't a normal morning anymore. "Eric," I said, my voice neither loud nor low, just firm enough not to be drowned out by his. "They rejected my daughter. Told her she wasn't family. They stood in front of her and said, 'You're not blood. So tell me, why should I pay for an event that excluded my family?'" He blew into the phone and let out a scoff. "You're using your daughter as a shield for some old resentment. You always think you're the victim. After all these years, you still haven't gotten over your childhood?" I set the phone on the counter. Didn't hang up. Let him keep talking if he wanted. But I walked out to the balcony. The morning breeze was cool against my robe. I stood there, listening to him rant about family, tradition, reputation, like he was carrying the whole bloodline on his shoulders. What he didn't know was, I had carried it once too. Carried it through silence. Through compromise. Through money. The only difference is, this time, I'd put it down. After a few more minutes, he stopped. Maybe because he noticed I wasn't responding. Maybe because he finally realized he was speaking into a void. He delivered one last line, like a verdict, "You need to grow up." I didn't answer. Didn't have to. I returned to the kitchen, flipped the second pancake, and hit the button to end the call. Not long after, Mark, my lawyer, called back. He confirmed he had sent the official documents to the event planners, requesting cancellation of all unpaid amounts under my name. Everything was handled legally, per contract. He said, they might be upset, but they can't do anything. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you. And if they call, send them to me. I'm not hiding." That afternoon, Jessica texted me a short message. "I won't sign the rest either. I just called the venue." Eric, my older brother, was the national pride of the Collins family. Private tutors, science camps, Dad's future leader. Jessica, my younger sister, was adorably perfect, as Mom liked to say. Whenever we had guests, Mom would recount Jessica's birth like it was a miracle. And me? I was the space in between. The empty seat between two triumphs. The pause people walked past but never sat in. I don't have a single big memory of being left out. But I have hundreds of small ones, tiny stings, like pins. A birthday party rescheduled 3 days late because of Eric's trip. A wrinkled dress handed to me last minute for family photos. A summer I stayed home to watch the little one while the others went to camp. But there's one memory I never forgot, because it wasn't a pin. It was a cut. I was 10 when the family planned a trip to an amusement park. We talked about it for weeks, maps of rides, picnic menus, even family t-shirts with our names printed on them. I was so excited I memorized the park layout, taped a picture of a roller coaster into my notebook. That morning, I woke up early, got dressed, and waited at the table. By 8 a.m., I was still home. Alone. They had left. No warning. No note. No call. I sat there until noon. Eventually, my mother called. I remember exactly the first thing she said. "Don't make a scene. We just thought, today, you weren't really part of the family." Her voice was so light. As if she were talking about someone absent from a photo, not her own daughter. When I asked her why, she just sighed. "You're too sensitive. Always making things bigger than they are." That night, I ate a cold hot dog while listening to them talk about roller coasters and taking pictures with people in character costumes. I sat there, twisting a napkin in my hand like I was trying to keep myself from disappearing. No one apologized. No one explained further. They just told me not to ruin the mood. For years afterward, I kept trying to believe I had imagined too much. That maybe I was the difficult child, always nitpicking, always wanting to be treated like a princess without doing anything to deserve it. I carried that belief into adulthood. I studied hard, started working early, moved out, got married, had a child, and made myself a promise I wouldn't repeat any of that with Alyssa. I loved that girl the way I had once wished to be loved. I listened to her talk for hours, even when she rambled. I remembered her birthday every single year. I cooked her favorite meals, hung up her drawings, kept every scrap of paper she scribbled on in preschool. But there was one thing I couldn't give her: recognition from my family. From the moment she was born, Alyssa lived on the sidelines. My mother never held her for more than 3 minutes. My father never called her by her real name. Every Christmas, the grandkids received handwritten cards, with their names, personal notes, sometimes even photos attached. Alyssa got a generic printed card, season's greetings. No name. No message. Nothing. I brought it up once. My mother said, "Rebecca, you're reading too much into it. We don't treat anyone differently." But I knew the truth. I saw it every time the cousins called to thank them for their Thanksgiving gifts and were met with air kisses and sweet laughter through the screen. Alyssa sat next to me once during one of those calls, then whispered, "I don't need to say thank you." I just told her, "You can thank me." But I knew she understood. And I swallowed it. The year she turned 16, we weren't invited to Thanksgiving. The reason? Smaller table this year. Keeping it simple. But Eric and Jessica were there, along with their 6 kids. My mom still posted pictures on Facebook, captioned, "Whole family together." Alyssa didn't ask anything. She just sent me a screenshot of the post and messaged 3 words. Whole, huh. Sometimes, people don't have to tell you don't belong. They just act like you're not there. And for Alyssa, the most painful part wasn't the absence, it was how clearly she understood that the absence wasn't accidental. I used to endure it, thinking I could endure enough for the both of us. But watching her grow up in the same cold silence I once lived in, I realized something: silence isn't sacrifice. Silence is permission for the wrong to continue. And at some point, you have to choose. Keep carrying a system that never counted you as part of it, or put it down, and walk away. Even if your hands are still shaking. I used to think that if I ever walked out of a big family event, it would be a dramatic moment. A scene. A glass shattering. A voice raised. Or at least, a confrontation in front of a crowd. But when that moment actually came, it arrived like a soft door closing, smooth, quiet, without impact, but irreversible. We left in silence. I walked ahead, eyes forward. Tyler wheeled the suitcase, my youngest daughter held his hand, and my son trailed behind, eyes glued to his iPad. None of them asked me anything. They didn't need to. They had seen my face when I returned from the back patio. The way I didn't cry. The way I bent down and said, "Grab your bags. We're leaving." 5 words. But 5 words that ended over 30 years of tolerance. The parking lot at 3 in the afternoon was drenched in golden sunlight. Guest cars kept arriving. People laughed, adjusted their ties, carried toddlers, handed over greeting cards. No one noticed a family of 4 walking the other way, no goodbyes, no waves, no farewell smiles. When the car door shut, I didn't cry. Didn't shake. I just felt a hollow expanding from the center of my chest, like something essential had just been pulled out, and I no longer had the strength to hold onto it. I pulled my phone from my purse. Didn't check Facebook. Didn't call Alyssa, I knew she wouldn't want to talk right then. I scrolled to my contacts and found the name, Mark Gillespie. He was the lawyer I hired 4 years ago to handle a dispute over my old house with my ex-husband. We weren't close, not even familiar, but he was clear. I called. He picked up after 3 rings. "Hi Rebecca," he said, his voice familiar and always direct. "What's going on?" "I want to withdraw my share of the payment for today's event." "The anniversary party?" "Yes. I haven't signed off on the final transfer. There's still over $10,000 that hasn't been dispersed." The contract is in the names of the 3 children, but only my sister and I have sent partial payments. I want to cancel the rest. He paused. Reason? They turned my daughter away. Told her she wasn't family. Mark exhaled lightly on the other end. He didn't ask anything else. I'll send a confirmation email and draft the paperwork. If they respond, I'll handle it. You don't have to do anything. Thank you, I said. My voice sounded foreign to me. Like I was speaking for someone who had just been held underwater and was finally surfacing. I hung up. Placed the phone on my lap. What rose up in me wasn't anger. It wasn't triumph. It was a kind of calm that was almost chilling. The kind of calm only those who have been pushed aside too many times can recognize, when you stop trying to explain and simply begin to reclaim what you once desperately clung to. Tyler looked at me. Are you sure? I nodded. If we don't draw the line now, our kids will grow up thinking this is where the line belongs. He gave my hand a light squeeze. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. We left the venue. The SUV rolled past the wooden Collins gate decorated with flowers like a proclamation. In the rearview mirror, I saw guests clustering together to take group photos. Everything continued as if no one had walked out. And maybe, in their eyes, I'd never really been there. But that no longer mattered. I didn't need anyone to validate my presence anymore. I just needed to know that this time, I didn't stay silent. I wasn't going to pay to watch my daughter be turned away from a place that was supposed to be home. If family is something people only allow you to belong to once you've met their conditions, then I'd rather stay outside. And hold on to what I'd lost for far too long, my self-respect. And my daughter. She flew from New York to California just to give her grandparents a hug. She booked the flight a month ago, chose the dress her grandmother once complimented as feminine, modest, and handmade a photo frame as a gift, yet when she arrived, they didn't open the gate. They stood there, under the blazing golden sunlight of Napa Valley, smiled faintly and said, "You're not family. Welcome to Family Ashes, where family secrets aren't just exposed, they're left in ruins. Where the one telling the story doesn't have to scream for you to understand how deep the hurt once went." And I want to ask you something. If your parents looked into your daughter's eyes and said she wasn't blood, didn't deserve to be present on a day they deemed sacred, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace like all the other times? Or would you stand up and dismantle the very system that has pushed you to the margins for years? Leave a comment if you've ever chosen self-respect over keeping things calm. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Family Ashes always has room for you. My name is Rebecca Collins. 39 years old. I live in Denver and work as a financial analyst for a large insurance firm, the kind of job no one finds exciting but that requires a kind of relentless precision. I was a single mother for nearly 10 years before I met Tyler, a kind man, a good listener, and someone who wasn't threatened by my past. We got married 3 years ago. He has 2 kids of his own, and I have a daughter that everyone treats like a footnote in my biography, except me. Alyssa, she's 20, currently studying communications at a university in New York. She's the result of my first marriage to Jordan, a tattoo artist who once lived in a rented RV parked behind a nail salon. Jordan was never the kind of man my parents wanted to call son-in-law. He didn't have a degree, didn't wear collared shirts, didn't know how to say polite things like "you look so youthful today." But he loved me. And he loved our daughter in a way no one in my family ever understood. My family, that is, my parents, Alyssa's grandparents, were throwing a 40th wedding anniversary party in Napa Valley. They rented an outdoor venue on a vineyard, hired a violinist to play, set up a stage, strung lights, and invited nearly 100 guests. Just the truly close ones, my mother wrote in the email. I didn't question that line at the time. That was mistake number 1. Alyssa bought her own plane ticket from New York to California with money she earned from part-time work. She picked out her dress. She wrapped the gift herself, a wooden photo frame she carved by hand, holding a black and white wedding picture of her grandparents from 1985. She didn't say much. Just texted me the day before the flight. I know this is a big day for them. I want to be there. Not because they invited me, but because I think it's the right thing to do. I nodded. Didn't say it out loud, but I quietly hoped things would be different this time. That maybe they had aged enough to finally see the value in a child they'd always kept on the edge. I was wrong. I checked my phone constantly for nearly half an hour. Each time I pulled it from my bag, I pretended I was just checking the time. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 3 p.m. At 2:49, still no text. No missed call. No sign of her. Sweat was starting to seep into the back of my dress, and I kept pacing under the arch draped in fake flowers, trying to project some image of calm for the people around me. Tyler was holding 2 glasses of champagne, one for me, one for him, both of which had gone flat, the ice nearly melted. He was still chatting with the kids, keeping the mood light like we were just at some weekend picnic. My youngest daughter was fiddling with a purple hair clip, trying to get it off. My son was hunched over the iPad, cartoon music leaking faintly from his headphones. I looked at all of us and felt like something was missing, the most important piece. I headed to the back lawn, where my mother was standing between 2 long tables, on her tiptoes adjusting the spacing between glass lanterns, like the distance between them could somehow define the dignity of the family. My father stood beside her, wearing his usual tight-lipped expression reserved for formal gatherings. I walked up. Mom, I think we should wait a few more minutes. Alyssa hasn't arrived yet, but I'm sure she's close. Maybe the flight was delayed or there's traffic. She turned to me, face unreadable, head tilting slightly like I'd just mentioned someone who wasn't on the guest list. She already came, she said. Around 1 o'clock. But I told her, today's an intimate event. Family only. I stood still. 1 beat. 2 beats. I didn't understand right away. I couldn't. She already came? I repeated. Why didn't anyone tell me? Where is she? Is she inside the house? No, my father cut in, his voice not loud but firm. We told her today wasn't the right day for her to be here. I waited for someone to laugh. Waited for my mother to raise an eyebrow, say something like, relax, I'm joking, then urge me to go find Alyssa. But there was no wink. No laughter. Just my mother, still brushing away an imaginary strand of hair from the tablecloth, speaking like she was reciting from a memo, she's not blood. Not really part of this family. Not official. It felt like someone had pressed an ice-cold palm down my spine. I'd heard that line before. But not at the moment when my daughter was standing alone outside a gate, clutching a gift she'd wrapped in pages from the New York Times because it looked kind of vintage. Not when she had flown nearly 2,300 miles, paid for the flight with money she earned from a part-time job, just to be present on what her grandparents called the most important day of their lives. I had imagined so many possible reactions for myself if something went wrong that day: rage, yelling, maybe at least a sharp exchange like everyone always expected from the middle child with the temper. But no. What I felt was a hollow space opening inside me, like a large room had just been vacuumed of all its air. I don't remember exactly how I turned, or what I said first. I only remember walking quickly back to the table where Tyler and the kids were sitting. I bent down and said quietly, with a calmness that even surprised me. Grab your bags. We're leaving. Tyler looked up, startled for a second, his eyes holding a trace of surprise. But he didn't ask anything. He set down his glass, stood up, and told the kids to get their things. All 3 of them obeyed, as if they'd rehearsed this moment. I picked up my coat. Didn't look at anyone. No explanation. No backward glance. As we walked through the gate, I heard the clink of glasses behind us, interrupted laughter, the shuffle of hurried feet on stone. But to me, none of it existed. All I felt was a weight in my chest and the steady steps of my youngest daughter walking just behind me. The gate behind us was still open, a breeze slipping through the gap, but I felt cold, like it had slammed shut long ago. I used to believe old wounds would heal on their own if I grew up enough, stayed busy enough, or kept quiet long enough. I used to think that if I didn't speak about them, didn't touch them, the memories would stay tucked away in some back drawer of the past. But what I never expected was that one day, they would return, not to hurt me, but to hurt my daughter. And in that moment, they weren't the past anymore. I grew up in a picture-perfect house in Sacramento. The lawn always trimmed, the white curtains always crisp, dinner at 6 o'clock, church on Sundays. A family that looked ideal on the outside. But inside, love had levels. It wasn't shared equally like people assume. It had a hierarchy, unspoken rules, a scoreboard where I never ranked first and often didn't appear at all,